to Business Inspire. I'm your host, Ivor Wharton. Every day on Guyana's roads, decisions are made in split seconds to speed up, to cross without looking, or to overtake on blind curves. And too often, those decisions end in tragedy. Today, we're asking a question that goes beyond the usual road safety conversation. What actually happens in that moment when a driver or a pedestrian simply doesn't see the risk in what they're doing? Joining me are two experts working to answer exactly that. Lacey Williams, a transportation engineer pursuing a PhD with research spanning land, water, and air safety. Eric Kipps is a master trainer with the National Road Safety Council of Chicago, and Kirk Clark, a defensive driving instructor. Together, they bring decades of hands-on experience in changing dangerous behaviors behind the wheel. They will also be presenting at Beyond the Wheel 2.0, a road safety summit organized by Clark's production, scheduled for October 2026, right here in Guyana. So, gentlemen, thank you very much for agreeing to do this interview.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
And good morning to your viewing public.
So we are basically going to get right into the interview. And before we start, I will ask each of you to introduce yourself to our viewers.
All right. Well, let me take the hump. I am Adrian Clark, and I am literally the chairman of the board of directors of Clark's Productions Incorporated. And I am literally the training director at Clark's Productions. We're a training development and consultancy organization in Guyana that leads to the total development of individuals here in Guyana.
All right,
Eric?
I guess I can go. Good morning, everyone. My name is Eric Kipps. My background is safety. I've been a safety professional for the past 28 or so years. I have a very deep sense of appreciation for road safety. I am presently a master trainer with the National Safety Council based in Chicago in the United States. I have done a lot of work in road safety throughout the Caribbean region and internationally. And I'm really happy to be part of this initiative, the Behind the Wheels program, and the Road Safety Conference there in Guyana. So I'm very excited to be part of this.
And I am Lacey Williams. I am a transportation engineer, and I specialize in highway safety as well as the study of human behavior and the interaction between human behavior and the engineering designs that we see on the roadway. So I have been working for a number of years, well over 2 decades, in transportation engineering design and safety. And my research actually speaks to how the impact of the engineering designs or the designs us engineers put out there, how they interact with the behaviors that we see across not just Guyana, but across the entire region. So I am excited and delighted to be part of the Beyond the Wheel program, which is going to culminate in the seminar in October. And hopefully we can share some insightful views and pointers so that we can improve the safety culture in Guyana and across the entire Caribbean region.
Now, I know that Clark's Production would have been doing a lot of work when it comes to sensitizing the local public as well as the diaspora on Beyond the Wheel. But for persons who are unfamiliar with what Beyond the Wheel is, Kirk, can you give us some background on Beyond the Wheel?
Sure. Now, Beyond the Wheel is an initiative that was birthed through Clark's Productions. And that's because, again, back in 2018, Eric Kipps and I, we teamed up on certifying for the first time a company in Guyana that primarily focused on training and development. And what we've been able to see over the years is instead of driving become better, driving has become more complicated. And that's because of the whole framework setting that we've seen happening in Guyana. So first, fundamentally, we can talk for hours on several different topics, how we've reached here. But I think primarily it starts with the conversation of every single day in Guyana, every day, there are more than 5 to 10 accidents that happen across the region. And of course, within that, we've got like a 2% or 3% fatality out of all those accidents. And if we look at life in itself, if we look at saving lives and we're talking about, real growth in economy, one life is too much. And if we've got on a daily basis life being lost or limbs and other people being lost, we've got to look at it from a perspective of saying, when is enough? Because a lot of people turn to look at the government and say the government needs to do this. But I always remember the statement that was primarily said, it's not what the government can do for you, but it's about what you can do for the country. And that's where Clark's Productions has come as a part of this. And we have found ourselves responsible as a training center that offers defensive driving. What could we do to help my country, of the love of my flag? How can I help in the growth process of what we're doing? Hence the birth of this, because out of this, we've all been able to write better manuals. We've met expats that's coming into Guyana. Clark's Productions is one of the companies that would have trained expats to maneuver on the roadways in Guyana. We've written that sort of manual for them. And we've recognized now, how do we make the Guyanese understand that this needs to happen? And so with that, Beyond the Wheel was birthed, because I don't think a lot of things have been answered from Guyanese. And the perspective is from this perspective. Now, let's say you're using the roadways. Well, we don't put into consideration, the roadways was made for everybody when the engineers would have made it. So it would have made to literally make people understand limits and limitations. It made people understand growth, and it made people understand expectations. Let me explain. So now walkways were made to make people safe and not put them on the streets. But now if we look in Guyana, most of our walkways are either taken over by vendors, or they're taken over by vehicles parking on walkways now in Guyana. And so now that puts a little thing into it. And when we started doing more studies, we recognized that we don't take into consideration blind people are using our streets. We don't take into consideration like what happened the other day, where a blind man fall into an open manhole, which we don't think about. We don't cater for paraplegians using our roadways. We don't think about people who are deaf are using our roadways. People with cataract, glaucoma, nearsightedness, blurred vision, children, old people. So again, we have become a nation where the growth of technology is great. The growth of technology also becomes a danger, because we're so fast-paced that we no longer slow down. We're no longer patient. We're no longer courteous. We don't consider a lot of things. And so Beyond the Wheel was developed to now I think we need to now stop for a second so that we can speed up back into the right perspective, because I think people need to have an awareness of the overall perspective, the bigger picture of what needs to happen for an entire country to grow, because the country is growing, but are we as a people, are we growing with the country? So Beyond the Wheel focuses on all those little dynamics as we do it.
So before we move on, I'm going to give both Lacey and Eric an opportunity to tell us exactly what they will be presenting on at this two-day summit.
I think I can go. So my presentation would be looking at artificial intelligence. and the use of artificial intelligence in the reduction of crashes. Yeah. How do we use the technology that is now presently available to us? Yeah, to reduce crashes, to reduce the incidents that we have that involve uh uh you know vehicles, right? And the operation and the different types of vehicles that we have in the same space. Yeah, artificial intelligence is now being used in several different industries. All right, and it is now coming into the automobile industry. In fact, one of my colleagues, all right, and I think he was in Guyana quite recently, looking at post-crash analysis. Yeah, and they are now using artificial intelligence. Now, when we understand the vehicles that we are now driving, we are practically driving computers. We are practically driving computers. The modern vehicle, all right, has, probably three, four, five different types of computerized systems within that vehicle. How can we use data to prevent accidents? How can we use uh, these AI systems to help drivers, yeah, who are sleepy, to help drivers who are trying to navigate? We are all now using GPS systems and stuff. How can we use artificial intelligence to assist us in reducing these collisions that are so fatal? Sometimes, the injuries associated with it. How can we use artificial intelligence? How can we take the present data that we have from the police, from organizations like Parks Pro, from all the different organizations who would be compiling data? How can we take that data, put it into an artificial intelligence system, and come up with systems, usable data that we can use to help reduce these crashes?
I'm going to be presenting a bit on the development that has occurred in Guyana over the past, I would say, 5 years or so, and how it impacts the average user. So as with everything with change, there is, Ghana has expanded and, its roads, its GDP has increased. And as a result of that, you can readily see the impact on the number of vehicles and the spaces that they have been occupying. However, there are other changes that we can make as users of the roadway, whether we are local, international, whether we are motorized users or non-motorized users. So for example, as someone who drives a vehicle, when I see a new piece of infrastructure, for example, a roundabout or a new traffic light system, how am I supposed to use the road, bearing in mind that I have to share the road with others? So sometimes we think of ourselves alone. Okay, it's as simple as me driving a vehicle, jumping into my car and proceeding along the roadway. But I also have my fellow driver who may be a lot older than I am. I also have a pedestrian who may have never driven a vehicle and may not understand how a vehicle is supposed to use the road back when the road was of a particular characteristic, far less when it has developed into what it is now, where you may have, instead of a single lane, you may have two lanes with vehicles driving at twice the speed. How then do we accommodate each other, and how must our behaviors change on the roadway to ensure that, the numbers that Adrian was referring to earlier don't go this way, but they continue to go, or we start at least plateauing and going downward. So part of it is understanding what that change is, understanding the new dynamic that is required, and even understanding how we can actually share the road in a way that accommodates all of us, so that growth in road development, new highways, new roadways, new vehicles does not necessarily translate into a less safe environment. Okay.
So, given what you all would have said, I know that in the region, and probably led by CARICOM, there has been this push for the region to be data and technologically driven, for infrastructure development in the region to be data and technologically driven. But there are issues from implementation to political will. How confident are you that, through the data and the necessary work that has to be done, that we can see real change coming about in this region?
Okay, well, maybe I can start from the perspective of the built environment, because as I mentioned at the top, I would have been working particularly in Guyana for a number of years and would have worked on a number of the major highway development projects. And what I can say, is that a lot more, at least from my experience across the region, there's been more of a push towards the data-driven, or using data rather to drive the outcome of developments, including safety. So I can say there has been that's a tick in the box, or feather in the cap, so to speak, for the authorities and the initiatives that they are trying to accomplish. Is it 100% perfect? No, I wouldn't dare step out of the box and say that, but at least there's an effort there. So there's some will and there's some willingness to go that particular way. There's also the fact that the statistics don't lie. So when you hear the reports of for example, the issues of accidents and incidents on the roadway, it plays on the mind of the general public and the leaders. It will be a concern, whether it's politically, as the case may be. So there is incentive, if not for that, for some sort of action to be taken. So from where I sit, there is, I think, a step in the right direction. However, with initiatives like these, this is where the point must be driven home that more should be done and more should continue to be done over time.
And just piggybacking off of what Lacey was just speaking of, I think Eric would have raised a valid point on AI and the uses thereof, because as we continue to look through the Caribbean, the more united CARICOM becomes, the stronger we are as a sector. And we have to look at it from every aspect of it. The more people dying in our roadways does not help us in any capacity of building. But we have to look at it as a nation. Like, for example, I often make this particular example, and I hope I don't, live to regret it. But anybody that says they're patriotic to a country, their patriotism goes beyond whoever is in office, but it goes towards their flag, towards that have grown for it. Is like an American citizen anywhere in the world. An American holds on to that red, white, and blue. If you find a Trinidadian outside, what they hold on to, that red, black, and white. And again, you look at somebody who the patriotism is to the flag. And I think when we've got patriotism towards one united body, CARICOM, and we're talking about it from a regional perspective, I think we can look at accidents and the just behavioral patterns of people going in a right stead. Because the more we talk about this and the more awareness we bring about this, is the better we become. Because the younger generation coming up, I truly do believe the best path to your success is understanding where your histories lie. For Guyana in itself, we need a lot more conversations on this, because I think we have slackened the reins in what used to happen in the old days, when we used to have people coming into the schools, talking to more young people about road safety. I think that needs to re-happen again, and not just in Guyana, but throughout CARICOM, that where we now make road safety a part of the curriculum, where it becomes like, for example, a standard, like how CXC is standardized across CARICOM. I think we need to develop a driving education program that needs to be standardized across CARICOM. And that there now helps us to broad-based driving as a standard rather than, now we can look at it from a regional perspective. So now you can have licensing from a regional perspective rather than a country perspective. So you can now, because if somebody comes from Trinidad and they're going to come into Guyana, they can only drive for 60 days or 90 days. Same thing if Guyana goes to anywhere else. But if we have a license that goes across the CARICOM region, I think that puts a driver in a different perspective. Now, drivers would want to earn that because it puts some sort of merit on your driving ability, and that goes, this driver, they recognize with safety in mind. They recognize that they have understood the rules and play the game. That's, I think, the best way I can explain that. And I know Eric can really expand on that based on his experiences throughout the Caribbean, where he has gone to do so many greater things. And the advance, again, of his topic with AI, I think that's just going to, within the next couple of, let's say, I don't even think it's going to be 2 years. I think it's going to be within the next 6 to 8 months. We're going to surprise to see what is happening, because I don't think we ever thought of 2026. We're seeing this sort of technology in vehicles in the Caribbean, that is. But it's no longer a fictitious thing. It's here. We've never thought in 2025 we'd be actually building robots in the Caribbean. But guess what? Yeah. It's here. And we're doing it. And it's about asking what's next rather than, I think I don't know.
Yeah, and when we look at technology and the speed at which technology, has been progressing, all right, we look at AI and how AI and the impact it has had throughout the world, all right. We also have to look at, within the space of the roadway, all right, and vehicles. We know, everyone is walking around with smartphones, and now we have smart vehicles. How do we make that cross between, the smart technology, all right, and what is required, from a government level, what is required from, at the personal level? How do we integrate these systems to turn these smart cars, to have them work as they have been designed? Now, when we look at smart technology in vehicles, all right, in your modern vehicle, there are several safety systems. You have passive safety systems within the vehicle. You have things like anti-lock brake systems and airbag systems, traction control. You have lane departure systems and stuff. They are all part of this smart environment that we are working with. All right. So we need to be able to adopt the technology. Now, UNESCO had a report in 2025, at the end of 2025, where they looked at the Caribbean and they looked at the readiness of the Caribbean nations for artificial intelligence and the adoption of artificial intelligence within organizations, within governments. Yeah. Added to that, over the last decade or so, the World Health Organization had looked at road safety and road traffic fatalities. And they came up with a plan that was based on 5 pillars. One of those pillars was safer vehicles. How do we move towards ensuring that our vehicles are safe? And these are some of the things that, we would be looking at during the seminar. How can we bring the smart technology to bear on road safety in Guyana?
Now, I know that something that is central to what all of you have been doing, and that is actually risk. What I want to ask is what actually happens psychologically or behaviorally when a driver doesn't perceive the risk in something they're doing, whether it's speeding, overtaking, or talking or texting on a phone?
If I could just jump this, because I know my two colleagues are just eager for that one. You see, risk is something called, I would use it as a dog bite. And that will lead me to this. For example, it is like they say, little boy bicycling got brakes. Is a fact is that when you don't see the danger of something, it means nothing to you. And that's the sad reality. A motor vehicle is meant to be used in a particular way for specific professional people. But if you take that same motor vehicle, which is a luxury in some cases, and you move it from point A to B with somebody who doesn't understand the risks in it, it now becomes a weapon. So that person who doesn't really understand risk is literally like if you're taking, and this is for the most graphic perspective I can put into your perspective, taking a 3-year or 4-year-old who really has not developed scope and put a knife in his hand and tell him to play with his brother and let's play Pokemon. Because that's what we're doing with vehicles when people are not trained. When people are not trained to understand, like for example, one of the major things, and all of us as defensive drivers we look at is the RUA process, the what if, what can go possibly wrong. If we look at speeding, it's just a matter of a click of a second, because what if you're traveling at 120 kilometers and you get a blowout? It's just a significant question. But if you're not thinking risk, that would never cross your mind. You're just looking at it because it's sexy. If you look at every race car driver, you look to what it becomes a race car driver, because each of them sitting behind that wheel had to go through some rigorous trainings because of the risks involved of speed. But the reality is, they're trained to do that. Again, with somebody who has no training, they sit in the car and they want to steal it because they want to take their girlfriend for a ride, which seems very innocent. We're just going right around the corner. But what could happen around the corner? For example, we've seen over and over with electric bikes. Let's not even go to cars. I have seen over and over in communities where there's electric bikes. I have seen children between the ages of 6 to 12 years old riding electric bikes on public streets because they got to go to the shop down there for mommy or daddy send them down the road to buy something. Do you understand the risks involved? Because they're not matured enough yet to understand their own risk of doing this. All they were told to ride in the corner. Riding in the corner keeps you safe. Does it? And the whole, let me put a little more fear into this. Do you understand that suicide victims are driving the roads as well, like us? Suicide victims are walking the streets. A person who's fed up of life, because one of the things that I am now focusing on, and I'm writing something on it, is mental health issues and driving, because I've recognized it deals directly to where it is. Because think about this from where you sit as an individual. You're a wife, you're a mother, you're a staff, you go to work, and you are triggered in the office. When you get behind the wheel, how are you going to drive? So that mental health process takes you on that street. And there's some people that are dealing with some real issues. And, in the Caribbean, we say old house pon old house, because they got situations that are just situational analysis. It is happening and it's keep piling on somebody. And there's this waiting to break. So in all this, we've got to be careful of that dog bite, because when you don't see the danger in the dog barking aggressively and you still keep pushing your hand, it's going to come out very, very seriously. But I know my other colleagues got tons of other expertise to this. Let me throw it over to them.
That's the touch on this risk thing. Risk has a lot to do with culture, all right?
Yes.
And culture impacts how we perceive risk, all right? Now, working throughout the Caribbean region, you get to interact with a lot of different cultures. And what happens in the different cultures? Okay, let's speak about the seatbelt. Let's speak about the seatbelt. All right. When you look at the seatbelt and seatbelt use, all right, in some cultures, it's not macho to use seatbelts. It's not macho to use seatbelts. I don't like seatbelts. You speak to people and they tell you, I don't like using the seatbelt. Why? Why you don't like? It's uncomfortable. Yeah. Or I just don't like how it's look. Is ramful my clothes? Those are some of the answers that you get, right? Now, when you look at how is risk perceived culturally? So when we look at Guyana, how does the average citizen perceive, yeah, as Adrian says, the risk, yeah, associated with operating a motor vehicle on the road? And in a big part, culture has to play, you have a big role. Culture plays a big role in how people perceive risk.
Can I just piggyback on that a little bit? Because I know Lacey's going to come in with it, but right there with the seatbelt issue in Guyana, firearm holders exempt from seatbelts. And I thought, that's crazy. If you get into an accident, then where's your firearm?
You're gonna die. Yeah, you're gonna die.
Where's your where's the sense in it? Where is your firearm? Then your firearm goes, somebody steal your firearm because you got into a collision. Then it creates a crime. You're in hospital, still sling up in 10 different areas.
Yeah.
Your firearm created a crime. Who's the police coming to? It's your firearm. So I don't see the sense in it. And I've seen it from every level. And again, I want to piggyback on that, what Eric just said, because it is a culture. It's a learned behavior. Culture is a learned behavior. So we have practiced, and this is where it comes out. It says, when bad habits become the norm, then where is truth into the bad now? Because when we've practiced so much wrong and wrong becomes the normal thing, then when you come with the truth or the fact, or you're going to drive differently or look at risk from a different perspective, you're deemed wrong. You're deemed the evil one. But again, sorry, Lacey. Sorry. Go ahead.
Fine. That's fine. That's fine. I just wanted to share another perspective which treats with both the points that Eric and Adrian were speaking about. And it relates to a recent survey I concluded in Trinidad on one of our major highway corridors. It was a human behavior survey, actually. And so it was basically self-reporting on driver behavior at the signalized intersections. And lo and behold, so one of the preliminary questions you would have asked was whether or not they thought running a red light was dangerous. And 99%, half a percent said, well, no, they don't think so. So we know where that was coming from. Yet still more than a third, 30% of those indicated that they ran a red light. And why did they run a red light? I was in a hurry. I thought I could have gotten through the signal. So basically, you understood the risk. So it's not that you did not know the risk, you understood the risk, yet still you made an active decision to break the red light for not a valid reason, not an emergency vehicle pressing you to get through, or that perhaps you were unsure whether you could stop in time. No, I was in a hurry. I didn't think I needed to stop. I thought I could have made the intersection before. So it touches on the two things my colleagues would have been sharing about. So one, and I guess maybe you can postulate that some may perhaps never they don't understand, perhaps maybe they never saw an accident or got into an accident, maybe a young driver, perhaps probably not as well educated. But then when you look at the demographic and the number of years experience with some of them, you can see some experienced drivers, but they just decided, whether it's culture, whatever, that listen, I don't need to wait, and I'm going to take the risk because, because of what? So then treating with those aspects now become pretty complicated. How do you then address the full spectrum? Because you have those who are ignorant, and then you have those who know, but yet still you have the same result. And that's where I think, the combination of of initiatives that we are doing, where we speak to a number of areas. How do we make the vehicle safer? Make the intersection safer? How do we address the individuals that are behind the wheel? Who are the individuals behind the wheel? What is it, their age demographic? Is it their, as my brother said here, is it that you have mental health issues? How do we treat with it? So there are a plethora of angles that we need to adopt, all of which have relevance in making these roads safer.
I want each of you to briefly address the issue of risk when it comes to pedestrians in Guyana and the Caribbean, because I know persons don't like to wait at pedestrian crossings. They cross the road anyway. They don't like to use overpasses.
So again, as we address this, risks, it doesn't matter whether you're a pedestrian, a cyclist, a motorist, but let's go to the pedestrians. Again, it's like very often we can see, if you're backing up, you can find somebody literally still walking behind a car that is in reverse, all right? Where technically that's a risk. But like, for example, and that's a passerby. A car is backing up. You see that car backing up, but you still walk behind that car as it backing up. As in, they have to stop because I am here. I'm passing. Right? Same scenario. It is that we have got to be educated. You see, this whole thing comes right back to the fact of education. We could spin around this all day long. It comes right back to what you know. And there's a big saying of saying what you don't know. Are you still guilty or less guilty of the fact? Because you may be appearing before the court and you said, I didn't know this. But the law says whether you know or didn't know or not, if you committed this is it. So pedestrians need to gain knowledge, and that knowledge still needs to come. And again, I believe the targets may be off. So I believe more work needs to be done in schools from the younger, from the new and younger generations that are going to come up, the future generations. So we have got to target from the preschools, from the teens, and these coming right up. And we have got to do far more work that we're doing on road safety in the schools. Like I said earlier, I believe that we need to develop a curriculum that needs to answer or address road safety from a holistic perspective from the school system. And when we develop that curriculum from schools, I think we're going to see overall a reduction of accidents, incidents, and so on. Because if people are made more aware, I think their reaction will be different. Of course, there's always the anomaly. Of course, there's always the people who are invincible. But I believe education plays the bigger factor. And I believe most people still, and adults well over 30, 40, 50, still don't know when they're doing wrong, because wrong has been practiced so blatantly in the public that now when right is seen, right seems wrong.
And that's to touch on that. It's the education. It's the education. Education. And of course, the awareness. Education and awareness. And as Adrian says, it has to start in the schools. It has to start in the schools. Jaywalking in the Caribbean, all right? I mean, when we don't speak about jaywalking in the Caribbean. You speak about, so you jaywalk when you're in the US. I mean, I mean, it's actually an offense in the US. Jaywalking is an offense. All right. But you have to understand also when we look at the engineering and the engineering of Caribbean roads, I think, I don't know what percent, if you're in St. Vincent, let's say, like I'm presently in St. Vincent, and probably 80% of the roads have no sidewalks. All right. So, from an engineering perspective, and Lacey could speak to this, right? I don't know what percentage that will be in Guyana. All right. But there are no sidewalks. So, pedestrians are forced to walk on the street and interact with vehicles. Yeah. So it's a very broad topic, and we can go on for hours and days speaking about this, but it starts with the education. Now you can have all the education, you can have all the awareness that you have, but then if there are no sidewalks, you still have to walk on the street. You still have to walk on the street. So there is no clear demarcation between a sidewalk and and the road where the cars we just interact. And that is what it is. So the only thing we can do at this point is to increase our aware or education in the first part, and then increase our awareness.
And from the engineering point of view, and this is where I think I can take the license to speak to some of the low parts of the profession. One of the things I've observed, and this is region-wide, so Guyana is not alone in this, but sometimes we design things that are not optimal for all of the users. So Eric was speaking about the lack of sidewalks in St. Vincent, but I will challenge any one of us here to look to go to a signalized intersection in Guyana. Let's say the one at Vissingen and what's that road? Is that South Road? That major intersection there close to the Botanical Gardens. Sorry, to the zoo.
Home stretch,
right. And try waiting on the pedestrian signal before you cross, anyone. And you'll find, among the best of us, we get impatient. And reason being that the design of facilities or waiting facilities, it's a science. And generally speaking, the average pedestrian gets agitated if they're waiting more than 15 seconds. Guess how long you have to wait at those intersections? I'll give you some homework to do, but it's more than 15 seconds. So the point is, all of us have our limits. I can't tell you that, you're going to a meeting, for example, and, you start running late and, you're waiting, and I'm giving away something here, you're waiting more than 40 seconds at an intersection. You think you're not going to try to weave your way among the cars if you see that the traffic isn't light? Yeah, but then that creates risk. There's a potential for an incident because somebody may be weaving their way through on a two-wheeler and so on, and may knock you. So as engineers as well, we also have a part to play in ensuring that the design is adequate and appropriate for the environment that we are in. And sadly, I've seen it, and again, this is region-wide, where we have long cycle lengths where even motorists, so sometimes you may see a motorist impatient 10 or 15 minutes down from the intersection, but why? Because he had to go through 2 or 3 red lights before he or she went through. So that is a part of it as well. So yes, there is the responsibility on the part of the user, but the science suggests that, things don't happen in that particular way. And this is science that is decades old. So that's a big part of what we have to do as engineers, and I'm thankful I'm able to bridge the gap between the psychology and the engineering to see the impact from both sides and understand now, hey, listen, as we develop the infrastructure, these are the things that we need to do to ensure to improve, at least to take care of that part of it, to ensure that the roadways are safer.
My next question is that over the years, we've been having road safety campaigns, we've had road safety summits, we've had consultations. But what do you believe have been missing in all that we have been doing over the years to really create real change?
Follow up, follow through. And that because, we're going to launch something like, for example, if you look at it all over the place, we're going to launch today. We're going after helmets, and it's going to last a week. And then the next week, you're going to pass the same police. Does. And we have to have a real rigid enforcement, and it can't only be policing. It has to be us as a people. It's are you ready to really, what are you ready to bring to your nation to bring change? And so for me, I believe that when people hear, it's like, for example, and I'm being blunt on this, when we talk about road safety, well, what a minibus scenario is, but for year after year, what training does the minibus association do? And if we do hear it, we see about 1 or 2 buses when we got over 400 buses on the street. So what kind of impact is that? And then we never look back at it and we just continue going on with it. We see the risks involved in minibuses in Guyana, but have we really made a change? You see, the thing is, again, when bad becomes norm, good becomes nothing. Because we can implement buses, like, for example, as simple Trinidad. Trinidad have these big buses that literally commute, which is government-owned buses, commute from wherever it is to wherever you're going to go. And of course, everybody has sectionized areas where they're going to go. So whether you're going south, north, whatever it is, it goes. But every bus it is built for safety. It is built where the driver cannot pass a certain speed because of the risks involved. It's built in such a way that it's built for impact. It's built for this. It's built. So again, where the seatbelts in this? How do we really, if we really want to make change, then change has to happen from top to bottom, bottom to top. And again, it comes back in re-education. And I'm trying not to hit one institution or organization on this, but the reality is we have to make that change, and the change starts with like safety starts with me, and change has to start with me. It has to be a personal thing, and we have got to bring that into perspective. This is just my contribution to it.
I would say, from my perspective, and if you look at, for example, the decade of action for road safety, which ought to have ended in 2020, but did not achieve its goals. If I were to really put my finger on it, I would say is perhaps a lack of understanding of where the problem really lies. Because we have looked at a number of things like, increasing the safety of vehicles, increasing the the barriers on the roadway, putting alcohol locks on the car, where if you blow and you're above a certain level, the vehicle doesn't start. So all of these things, they are nice things to have, but ultimately, culture really drives road safety. Any system you employ, and I think this is what Adrian was hinting at just now, is that without the requisite will and the need for or key stakeholders recognizing what's important, then it doesn't happen. If you look at the thrust towards infrastructure development, for example, in Guyana, why is it going on such a sustained basis? It's because there's a recognition, one, of the need for development, and there's consistency and persistence, despite all of the problems you may have contractually, which always come up, and issues of whatever the case may be. But there's an understanding of what is required to ensure that Guyana gets to a certain point. But the thing is, in engaging with the initiatives, do we understand, first of all, and I guess it's a rhetorical question, that, for example, changing the culture first is required prior to, for example, implementing new laws? So Do you think we can just simply increase the fine for staying in the box at an intersection, and that, you increase the fine and that will result in people obeying the law? As opposed to if we change the culture and say, listen, we understand that, okay, first of all, the enforcers, this is what needs to be done. This is why it needs to be done. This is how it affects you. Because lo and behold, the day a police officer goes and sees his family member or loved one in pieces at an intersection, is that what it's going to take before I realize, okay, I need to do something differently? So recognizing that the solution is not really in the tool, but the agency or whatever entity is utilizing the tool and under getting that understanding or that drive in that particular, changing that culture or changing the focus in that regard, I think is fundamentally what has been lacking previously. And if that does not change, then we'll be going into our third decade of action, 2030 to 2040, with the same results.
And they say very correct. All right. One of the main reasons why the decade of action did not work is because it did not take into account the different cultures. So you had success. You had success uh, in different countries. All right. Even in Trinidad, we had a marked amount of success coming out of the decade of action. All right. But then, as you just said, the will, road safety is not a sexy topic. Where is the will? There must be the will, and you made a very good point with the development. So the will is there for the development, but where is the will? Where is the will? And this is one of the issues we have throughout the Caribbean. Where is the will to implement the change? And that is the key point.
My other question, which basically is following up on the Decade for Action for Road Safety, and what do you believe would have worked in other countries facing similar challenges like Guyana that you think is transferable? And I want to add another question to this, is realistically, how long does it take for meaningful behavioral change to take place once you start applying, whether it's evidence-based interventions and stuff like that?
Let me just jump in here quickly, right? When we looked at the decade of action, right, and we looked at the change in Trinidad and Tobago, and I want to use Trinidad and Tobago because Trinidad and Tobago had something like a 30% decrease in road traffic crashes and fatalities. Yeah. And that was basically looking at the three E's of road safety: enforcement, education, and engineering. All right. I'm going to single out one of them, and I'm going to look at enforcement. All right. In Trinidad and Tobago, over the past 5 or so years, the enforcement has increased or was increased, right, exponentially. Now, when you look at what happened and you look at the fine with, with road traffic breaches and that kind of stuff, that was increased. All right. The use of the breathalyzer, the use of the speed guns. All right. These things were implemented and it worked. It worked. All right. The instances of driving under the influence of alcohol, these things went down simply because of the enforcement. The enforcement.
And if I can, when we're talking about change management or change, it can only happen in one or two perspectives. We got incremental change and then we got the harsh method of change. And in some cases, they both work just depending on what you do. But again, when we look at it from the perspective of what we can borrow, and let's look at it from the change, how long does it take to implement or change? It varies across sectors. So again, we've got to look at it from every dynamic of how we're going to look at it. From where are you starting? So For change to actually significantly happen in Guyana, we have to look at it first from where we're starting. So if you're trying to teach an old dog new tricks, it ain't gonna happen. Change is going to take much longer to happen. That meaning, if you're only focusing on the people who are currently using the roads, driving and doing that, you have a work cut out for you, because technically it's like teaching an old dog new tricks. You don't bend a tree or try to train a tree when it's already grown. So for my thing is change management. Now, if we look at it from the real perspective, and we start taking from, one for a better word, naivety into from functionability. If we go to school again, by the end of, and I basically say by 1 decade, we will see an entire massive reduction of almost anything you want to see, depending on what the course is. And if we're looking at road safety, I would say in 1 decade, if we start from schools, from the people who have no experience and are ready to listen and learn from that process, you will see change. Put it this way: if you want something as an advertiser, the advertising becomes effective when you start to advertise to the child. So if you go and you advertise, you go to the school, you start talking about seatbelt, you start teaching that child. By the time that child reaches into the vehicle and the daddy or mother don't put on the seatbelt, they start to tell you, because children have no filters, they can tell you, you wrong. Uncle Lacey come and tell me in school that if you don't put on your seatbelt, this is what can happen, and then you can get hurt, and you're not gonna be there with us anymore, and you don't love me, and I can they gonna make you guilty between there to work that you can put on that seatbelt. Every time you get in that vehicle, because the change happens. Again, Christmas is not advertised for old adults like you and me. They advertise it for the children. Because when that child gets in that store, why you think you ain't going to shop with your child? Most parents leave the children home when they're going to shop, because they're a menace to society. Because if that knowledge gets into their head that they can get this thing, they don't stop. I don't listen. I've learned two things in life. Don't promise a child something, or ever get a woman angry enough that she goes on her knees. If God can't realistically say no, who am I?
Well, for me, when I hear about change, I think I support what Adrian was saying, and it reminds me of a campaign we had in Toronto when I was in primary school, something called Nag Charlie Away. I don't know if you remember that, Adrian, but essentially, Charlie was a scruffy type of guy who would throw litter anyway. And the slogan was just nag Charlie away. So basically, how we nag Charlie away by putting your rubbish in a dustbin. And as simple as that was, decades later, I remember that as if, I will still sometimes just pass on the road, and if I see, a piece of paper passing through a corridor, I might just pick it up and throw it in the bin, because the message got infused in my head. So I think the concept of ingraining things, or in a sense brainwashing the youth into positive behavior, I think that has a lot of merit and should be started immediately, if not sooner. Unfortunately, sometimes it takes tragic events to cause us to change direction, and without spending too much time on the recent tragedy. But sometimes, we need a little wake up call to say, listen, enough is enough. Because while yes, we need to look at the maybe a decade or so and bring children, there are things that we as adults need to do, must take cognizance of, and recognize that, listen, another tragedy can be around the corner if the same circumstances, if the same conditions, if the same environment exist, and there are things that we must do now. And that's a reality. We can't wait 10 years to tell to control the speeds on the roadway or to have, 5 to 10 accidents a day with 2% fatality. We can't wait. One is too much. So there are some things we just have to say, look, enough is enough. I'm not going to have another one of this. I'm not going to have another one of that. I'm going to stop these now. But at the same time, if we want more of the population to buy in, that must also be supported with these campaigns that sensitize the youth and get their mind focused in the right direction when it comes to safety.
So I know, gentlemen, we have been here a while, and my final two questions is what it is you expect persons to take away from Beyond the Wheel. And then I'll give Adrian a chance to tell persons how they can get more information on Beyond the Wheel.
If I could start, what I would like participants, who would be attending, firstly, come with an open mind. Come with an open mind. All right. Be prepared to absorb. Yeah. A lot of information will be passed. The event will be very interactive. All right. Jot down your questions. All right. We have a team of experts, that will just be there and waiting, to answer your questions. But come with an open mind.
For me, I guess probably two things. One, at the conclusion, I would like each participant to go away with a renewed sense of responsibility towards a fellow road user. Whether you are a driver, whether you are a pedestrian, a bicyclist, I would want you to have that renewed commitment to being my brother or sister's keeper, as it may be, on the roadway as I venture out the door. Second thing, I guess, comes out of the first one really, is to understand the things that can create hazards on the roadway or that can increase the risk of injury or fatality, and commit to avoiding or at least addressing it. It could be as simple as checking your tires when you go out. And the point is we can't prescribe everything, but if you reorient your mind coming out of that session, then it will take care of a lot of those things that are unwritten. Hey, listen, maybe instead of me trying to rush to get to the intersection before, maybe if I just wait and see a little bit and just to ensure that somebody else hasn't seen me and I avoid a collision. So one comes out of the other. Just that general change in disposition to be that change that we're looking for.
Be the change you want to see. And that's how I start this off. Be the change you want to see. Guyana is poised, and very often I believe that we need to do, the takeaway from this is becoming a true patriot. Let's become patriots for our country. Not, it has nothing to do with following politics, but has to do with patriotism. Has to do with understanding that this is where you have to grow. This is where you're probably going to be buried. This is where you're going to, if this is the place where you want to grow your kids to see the future, then let's make an environment that is safe enough that our kids can grow and see the future. But if we're going to go about it haphazardly and don't care-ish and only serving, and this goes beyond, it's only serving political wants and needs and it has to go with each political party. And because my thing is, I believe if somebody has done great work, why can't the next person going into office continue the great work? No, but we can't do this because there's day work and there's now work and that's what I think now. Every 5 years we start back from ground zero when we could just continue going. So we've got to really look at it from real initiative process of change and what we really want to see our country look like. So the best way of doing it is like, again, come with an open mindset. I think Eric said it right. Come with a perspective of, you know what, let me see what they're offering in this, because in that venue, you'll be able to see the technology as it is. As Eric was pointing out, AI, you're going to be able to see the cameras that are there that are now being implemented in Guyana. And this happens now for the expats specifically. But as a company, how can I infuse this AI into my vehicles to keep my drivers safe, to keep my company accountable? And this needs to happen across the board. It's like I see people hiring drivers every single day, but all they want is a driver's license. How safe is a driver's license from where we sit anywhere? Because drivers now can accumulate a license very easily. So how valid or safe does a driver's license mean? So I think driving now, because if you look at it from world's riskiest jobs, drivers is number 7 under the most world's risky jobs, because it's a very dangerous, hazardous job that people are doing. But what has happened, we have made it fragile and frivolous. It's just a gybo, right? Whereby a driver now comes on, and again, this is studies we've been doing since 2018 to 2026. A large number of drivers have a problem with remedial reading and writing. Where does that come along? A major common law, but how does that influence road safety? Because critical thinking plays a major factor on the way you respond. Now that can go both ways, because you do not need education to respond in a particular way, because experience can now be the major education factor, right? It doesn't necessarily take a book, pen and paper book to make you brighter to use the roadways. But when we look at it on reasoning, we have seen the qualified people, same pen and paper, same qualified professionals drive as if they have no educational value together. So again, we need to be able to build a common ground of what driving or road use need to be looking like. And so to get to us is very simple. You can dial the numbers. My personal number is 659-9596, which is 592-659-9596 for more information on how you can get involved. Or you can dial 663-0324. You can get involved in that, or you can send an email to info@clarkspro.org or beyondthewheel 2.0@gmail.com. And we're going to respond to you from that. And again, just reach out. I believe that everybody needs to play a role in this. It is going to be on October 6th and 7th at the Artichon Convention Center. It is 2 days. And you can, if you want to walk off the road, you want to be part of that conversation, yes, there's a registration that you need to go through. Give the numbers a call. And of course, you can go through that registration. Registration is free. And of course, you can come and you can be the part. So again, in part of this activity, we're focusing on youth development. We just trained about 20 young people, spanning from the age of 7 to 15 in first aid CPR, because a lot of times, sometimes we miss the young people in training first aid. So sometimes, a lot of times during this August vacation, they're home, you're at work. What if something happens? At least they can respond in a small way until help arrives. So start teaching your kids some creative things. First aid CPR is one of them. They need to be able to teach them how to handle a fire extinguisher, because something may happen while they're home that you may not be there, or you may be asleep. So we may look at them as they're too small to do this. No, they're not. Right? Take their minds away from the tablets for a bit. Take their minds off the computers for a bit. Give them something that is tangible that they can use. So those are some of the takeaways, and we would like to really, really see our country grow. That's why we're here. And this is not going to be a one-off. This is going to be an annual event that Clark's Productions will be doing. So this is just our second event on this. The last event would happen with Pegasus in 2025. It also was a massive success. We would have partnered with the Guyana Manufacturers Service Association, but this year we have bite the bullet and we stand great with some of the. We stand alone for this as we started this, but again, with the people that are now surrounding us, like Scoop and Sterling Products and Ramps Logistics and some of the sponsors that are coming on board, it's magnificent. And of course, you're going to hear more about those in the upcoming days. Thank you.
Well, Lacey, Eric, and Kirk, it has been a pleasure speaking with you, and I know that the interview has been very informative.
Well, we hope we could create impact.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, goodbye for now.